Be confident, be bold, be authentic, but don't forget to take action. This is Ordinary to Badass, where our stories empower women to step into the spotlight of their own lives and pursue what they're truly passionate about. It's time to step into the arena and become more than just extraordinary. It's time to become a badass with your host, Marie Sonneman.
Welcome to Ordinary to Badass, episode number 36. In this interview, I talked to Roz Savage. Roz is such a badass. I can't freaking wait for you to hear this episode. She has so many good stories to share, like rowing several different oceans to include the Atlantic Ocean for 154 days on a small little boat. 2 of her oars broke. She just has so much to share and so many actionable steps. I think that's my favorite part, is all of the actionable steps that you can take through the hard times. And she also talks about The Gift of Solitude, her new book. How can you deal with solitude during coronavirus? It's so applicable to what's going on right now. So if you're struggling with coronavirus, you may want to check out her new book, or definitely this episode. Now, let's switch and talk about something else. I created an Ordinary to Badass Money Challenge. It's an 8-day challenge on the Ordinary to Badass Facebook page. Now, as you're hearing it, it's day 8, the last day of the challenge. But it will live on the Ordinary to Badass Facebook page forever. Here's the thing. Are you struggling right now? Has Rona hit your wallet? Right now are hard times. So many people have lost jobs, been laid off, and it wasn't expected. There was no time to prepare. So if you or your spouse, if you guys got laid off, or you're just struggling financially because of the situation, or just in general, maybe you were struggling before coronavirus hit. Now it's like, yikes, what do I do? This 8-day money challenge is totally for you, because I help you to figure out ways to cut spending and to create a budget. That's first and foremost, is to create a budget so you can figure out, prioritize what you want to pay first. What bills are the most important to pay right now? So I would definitely suggest that you check out the Ordinary to Badass Money Challenge, and let's get our finances squared away together. If you've listened to the show, you've probably heard I paid off $106,000 in debt in just under 2 years. I totally contribute that to getting my budget in place, to figuring out how to prioritize where to spend my money. You can do it too, friend. So join the Ordinary to Badass Money Challenge. It's free on the Ordinary to Badass Facebook page. Now to the episode. Welcome to Ordinary to Badass. Whether you're ordinary or badass, I'm glad you're here. Today's guest is Roz Savage. Roz, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Been looking forward to it.
So before we go any further, I've got to ask you, do you consider yourself ordinary or badass?
It's a great question. I would say that I am ordinary, but I've been lucky enough to do some pretty badass things.
Tell us about some of those badass things.
Well, they consist mostly of rowing alone across extremely large bodies of water, like the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, alone. So I've spent in total about 520 days and nights of my life alone on a 23-foot rowboat, rowing 12 hours a day across many thousands of miles of ocean.
That's insane. Did you
on
ever
many
see
levels,
yourself
that is
doing...
insane.
Did you ever see yourself doing that, like before you ever did it, or like growing up? Is that a dream you always had?
Oh, I was probably girl least likely to row across oceans when I was growing up. I was a real bookworm, bit of a teacher's pet. Um, I was actually absolutely crap at sports when I was at school. Nobody wanted me on their team because I couldn't catch and I couldn't throw and I couldn't run fast. But I suppose, I was quite good at what I call Forrest Gump type sports, which is where somebody says, run, Forrest, run. And, he just starts running. And then at some point, somebody tells him to stop. I was okay at those sort of endurance things that nobody else wanted to do. But no, I was not sporty. I wasn't a tomboy. I wasn't particularly brave. No, it really was quite a radical change of direction. Even throughout my 20s, I was a management consultant working in an office in London. So again, it's not what you would have seen coming at all. But life had other plans for me, evidently.
I love that. I love how things end up working out, even if you don't see it in advance. So can you share with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, my life could have turned out so differently. Throughout my 20s, I just really wanted to fit in. I'd really bought into this idea that having a good job and especially a good salary can make you happy. That was very much the message that I internalized growing up in the 80s. And it took me about 13 years to admit that actually all these things that were meant to make me happy were not making me happy. And I suppose that's privilege on my part. I was lucky enough to find out from firsthand experience that having a nice house and a nice car and nice vacations and a moderately nice husband can get you so far. But the problem basically was I didn't know who I was. And so I was trying to fit into the mold of what a successful person ought to look like. And by the criteria of my time, I did pretty well at that. I'm really good at jumping through other people's hoops. I think this is maybe part of the danger of being good at passing exams when you're at school, that you end up doing things because teachers and parents are pleased with you than because they're things that you actually want to do. Like you're jumping through all these hoops, but they're not your own hoops. And so when I was round about 30 years old, this was becoming a bit of an existential crisis. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I knew management consulting was not it. And what really brought it home to me was this exercise that I did one evening after a particularly bad day in the office. And it was inspired by Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. And the exercise is to begin with the ultimate end in mind, which is our own death, which sounds kind of morbid. And right now in the time of coronavirus I don't know, maybe it's the best time to talk about death. But what this exercise really did for me, so what you were meant to do was to write 2 versions of your own obituary. How you wanted to be remembered and how you would actually be remembered if you carry on as you are. And I'd done all of these other exercises, what color is your parachute, all of that kind of stuff, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it had never really worked. I'd completely failed to find anything that really inspired me. And what this particular exercise did was, with all the previous exercises, I'd started from where I was and had thought, well, what do I know how to do? What are my skills? What are my talents? What are my experiences? And what can I do with those? Which is actually unbelievably limiting. Whereas if you start from the other end, if you go to the end of your life and say, well, where do I want to be then? Hopefully quite a long time in the future. And then you reverse engineer from that. It actually opens up your imagination so much more. And the other really valuable thing that it does is that it reminds us that we are actually mortal. which when we're in our 20s and our 30s, I think we often kind of forget. We tend to assume that we have forever. And as current times are reminding us, we just really don't know how long we have.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
it's really never too soon to start living the life that you want. So that exercise absolutely changed my life. And the person that I described in the fantasy version, it wasn't really about what I would do. It certainly wasn't about what I would own, which was far too much what had governed my life up to that point. It was really about how it would feel to be me. When I'm at the end of my life, how will I feel looking back? And I wanted to be able to feel proud and happy and grateful and kind of full of love for my friends and my family, and full of a sense of a life well lived. And this person that I described was a radically different person from who I actually was at that time. It was a confident, go-getting, courageous kind of person who just lived the heck out of life. And that was about it. It was really vague. It definitely didn't mention rowing across oceans. But it was like I'd sort of reconnected with my soul. It was like I'd said to my soul, what do you want? Like, what's your grandest vision for what we're going to do in this lifetime? And it was a very different thing from asking my ego the same question. Because I think when we answer from ego, it puts us in a very different place. It does tend to look a lot more like we're building a resume rather than building a fulfilling life. So I highly recommend that exercise. Just don't hold me responsible for the consequences.
So what did that feel like after you wrote that? Like, what was the feeling inside of you, and did that move you to change?
Oh, such a mixture. Because when I finished writing the fantasy version, I was so excited and inspired and uplifted and just enthused about everything. I was like, wow, let's go do this. And then ego went, no, like, that's not possible. Like, you're married to this man who is not going to be on the same page with this. And where's your security? What about your job and your salary and your home and all of those things that sensible grown-ups are supposed to have? And on that occasion, ego, the fear voice, got the better of me. And I was like, well, this is just an impossible dream. Can't happen. So, let's just put it away and try to forget about it. So that's literally what I did. Shove those two pieces of paper in a drawer. But I think once you've seen something, especially seen it from that soul level, you can't unsee it. So over the next couple of years, I basically self-sabotaged my career, my marriage, the things that were holding me back from being that person that I really wanted to be. And it wasn't conscious at the time. It was just a series of what probably looked like really catastrophically bad decisions. But looking back now, I'm immensely grateful for, in fact, they weren't even really decisions. They were just things that happened. And, but I feel like on a subconscious level, they were exactly the things that needed to happen to set me free to live that life that I'd imagined for myself. So it was kind of messy, and I'm sure I gave my mum an awful lot of sleepless nights, but it all turned out okay in the end. In fact, better than okay.
So earlier you mentioned that you had to find yourself. I'm sure that writing exercise helped you, but how did you go about finding yourself and what you wanted?
Yeah, the finding yourself is such an interesting phrase, because I do think that we are all born with unique, innate talents and preferences and inclinations. But I think it's sort of a dance between what we are born with and then what we create. So yeah, it's partly finding yourself, but it's also partly defining yourself. And to go about that, again, it was a kind of messy process, and I'm actually really comfortable with that. And what happened was that I dabbled around in various things. I was a photographer, which is what I thought I wanted to be, but I was finding it too hard to find that sweet spot between what I love to do, what the world needs, and what the world is willing to pay me for. That was a bit too challenging in the photography context. So I tried some other things. I was an organic baker for a while. I was going to renovate a houseboat and turn it into a coffee shop. I was going to be a writer, so I went and travelled around Peru for 3 months with the intention of writing a book about that, which I did actually do, although that particular book's never been published. And none of those things fully panned out at the time, but as I went through that process, I was refining my concept of what do I love to do, like what makes me come alive. And from each of those experiences, I learned something about what I do like and what I don't like. And eventually, okay, I was going to miss out a bit. I should just say that while I was in Peru, a really important thing that happened for me was I had this sort of environmental awakening. I saw the retreating glaciers in the Andes and found out about climate change. And for me, that just became the most important thing, like literally in the world. And I knew I just had to do something about that to raise awareness, to inspire people to change behaviors. It just felt humongously important to me. So I'd found my purpose, but I hadn't really found my project. And it was about getting on for a year after I came back from Peru, having been sitting with this question of what can I actually do from like zero platform, zero profile, just a burned out management consultant who has now dabbled in a whole bunch of different things, none of which really worked out. What can I do to get people's attention for my environmental message? And I'd been sitting with that question by that point for about 6 months, getting kind of frustrated, going, come on, the clock's ticking, the earth is getting even more and more screwed up, like, got to get on this. But what? And then literally like a bolt from the blue, this crazy idea just popped into my head one day. Yeah, I had heard of ocean rowing. I thought it sounded masochistic and horrible and not like anything that I would ever want to do in this lifetime. But then just this vision, I mean, not like a literal biblical kind of vision, but just this image popped into my head, or this message like, well, Roz, you know how to row. You rowed at university. Rowing across oceans, like, how hard can it be? You could do that and use your adventures to raise awareness for our environmental issues. And so really that was the big light bulb moment. That was when I sort of went, oh, that's it. And then I went, oh my God, that is the worst idea I've ever had. and I tried to make it go away, but at the same time, I could see how it just ticked all the boxes. All of that work that I'd done during my years of dabbling, and the criteria that I'd narrowed it down to, of whatever I was going to put my heart and soul into, I just knew this was it. It did feel kind of like a calling. It did feel like I'd been asking this big question, saying, what can I do? I'm here, I'm ready, willing and able. Just give me a job to do that really is going to further that environmental message and will also help me to grow as a person. And the universe gave me an answer that was radically different from what I'd expected. But I could see a kind of insane perfection in it all as well. So that's what I did.
How did you come up with rowing? Like, had you ever done rowing before, or how did you make the connection?
I had rowed. I'd rowed pretty seriously when I was at university, but I, by this point, hadn't rowed in 10 years. Like I say, I don't really feel like it was me that made the connections.
Yeah.
You know, it's weird because I am a planner. I'm a, queen of Excel spreadsheets, and probably every single decision I'd made in my life before that point had been a process of cognitive analysis. It was very much a head process of, what goal am I trying to achieve and how can I get there? It was a very linear approach. And this was a completely different thing. this was just like lightning strike out of the blue. But I don't know if you or your listeners might have had this experience, that the best ideas we ever have are the ones that once they've landed, they seem so obvious. It's like, well, why didn't I think of that? But you know what? I really don't feel like I thought of that. It was like some bigger intelligence had this in mind for me. And I realize that sounds a bit metaphysical and esoteric, and it's not something that happens to me every day, that's for sure. But on that occasion, it really felt that that I'd been called. But I think that can happen to anybody, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just my worldview. A more scientific person might go, well, you had been asking this question for a long time. You'd been reading about campaigning, and, you know, subconsciously all this had been percolating around. And then, you know, you finally had your breakthrough and your insight. So it depends on your worldview, whether you want to believe in God or magic or science or whatever. But I just know it was probably the best idea I ever had in my life, and the worst at the same time.
Yeah, but I also think sometimes things don't make sense looking forward when you're trying to figure it all out, but then looking back, it's like, oh, of course that was how it was supposed to work out, you know? And then also, I'm a believer in like your intuition, or like listening to yourself. Sometimes you have to get quiet and really listen to what you really want, as opposed to what our head tries to tell us should be right.
Yeah, I think especially in North America and Europe, we tend to be brought up in a very head-oriented kind of way.
Yes.
And we're meant to be sensible and rational about things. But I actually now absolutely acknowledge that my best decisions have come from intuition. And that's really something that I started experimenting with when I was in Peru. I'd just read the Celestine Prophecy, which, you know, is kind of a little bit corny, or a lot corny. But for me, that idea of trusting, quote, air quotes, coincidence, and trusting intuition, it was a really new idea to me. But I thought, well, you know, let's play with this idea for a while and see how it works out. And it worked out brilliantly. So now I really try to operate from primarily intuition, but using my head as the executive. So it's like the intuition is the CEO, but the brain is really, really good as like the COO, like to get stuff done.
Right.
I think Einstein said something like I'm going to get this a bit wrong, but basically he was saying that the brain is a great servant, a faithful servant, but a terrible master. So it's best when we choose our strategic direction from a more intuitive, heart-based place,
right?
And then go over to you, brain, because clearly, like, you can't organize an ocean rowing expedition from intuition. You have to get really, really organized. I mean, this is where the Excel spreadsheets really came into their own. You know, I had to work out all of my finances and my training programs, and what courses was I going to take, and what did I need on that boat to keep me alive for months and months at sea. How many calories was I going to need every day? You know, I was absolutely meticulous in a very brain kind of a way when it came to the organization. But the direction had been set very much from that heart-led intuition, and it worked out really well.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such good advice. Like, you don't have to take everything from your intuition, but at least maybe take your first guidance from that. So
yeah, it's when heart and head are in alignment. I think that's when, because actually what happened in that first week after my sort of like lightning bolt were heart was going, hell yeah, like, let's do this. Brain was going, no. You know, it was that brain ego mind again going, this is a really horrible idea, like, forget all about it. So there was a toing and froing between the head and the heart for that whole week. And every morning I would just wake up with more and more reasons why it was a cool idea, why it met all my criteria. So by the end of the week, the head was going, yeah, okay, yeah, we could do this. All right, we're on board. And I really felt aligned, and that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I don't know that any of us have figured out the perfect balance. Like I think ideally it's like, yes, that's the sweet spot, but going through it seems to be a whole lot harder. But
Yeah,
let's,
again, like you said earlier, it's looking back that we can join up the dots. At the time, it feels like a much more chaotic process, and um, it's funny because at the time it felt like an exercise in decision making and exercising free will, and yet looking back now, it seems completely obvious to me that I would row across the oceans.
right,
I mean, it just had to happen,
right.
and I think really the crunch or the kicker or the deciding factor for me was all of that work that I'd done on myself, like from the obituary exercise through the dabbling around in various careers to the experimenting with the Celestine prophecy kind of stuff. I'd come so far. I'd done so much work on myself to learn, to grow, to find out who I was, that if I had that flash of inspiration and I'd gone, yeah, no, I would have felt like I was betraying all of that work that I'd done. It actually felt like all of that work had been leading up to that particular moment of inspiration. And if I'd have just backed off and gone, no, I think you actually wanted the person next door because that's really not me. Remember, I'm the one who's crap at sport. Um, it would just have felt like the ultimate betrayal.
So
So yeah,
what do you
so I
say
had
to
to
the
do it.
right? What do you say to the person that's backing off right now? Like their intuition has told them to do something, but they're backing off.
Well, I think the way that I managed to get my brain on board was I asked myself, well, it's a crazy idea. Okay, let's just get that out there. It's a crazy idea. But just supposing that I was going to do it, hypothetically, what would I need to do to make this happen? Um, what books would I need to read? What people would I need to talk to? What courses would I need to take? What would I need to buy? So I made a massive to-do list on an Excel spreadsheet, obviously. Um, and as I looked down this very long list, a very detailed list, I thought, actually, there's nothing on there that's too scary. I'd broken it down to such a level of detail that it was specific enough for me to wrap my head around. You know, I'd been a project manager in my professional life. And so I was like, well, this is just a different kind of a project. Um, but I actually think that I can do this because now I've got my itemized list. I just need to start at the top and start working my way down. I also remember talking to a friend of mine who wanted to set up a non-profit, and she also is a huge fan of Excel spreadsheets. And her approach was the things that she felt she'd be giving up from her existing life in order to start the non-profit. She listed the things that she would give up, and then she put the worst case scenario against each of those.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the third column, she said, can I handle the worst case scenario? And in every case, she went, yeah, I could handle that. So no reason not to do it. So I think when we're afraid of something, you know, she was afraid of what she would lose by transitioning out of a successful career into something very different. When we actually unpick those fears, when we really, really look at them bravely, most of them are not as scary as we think they are. It's just when they're sort of buzzing around in our heads and we're like,
Right.
whoa, it's all a bit scary in there. They seem bigger and louder and more important than they actually are. And when we write them down and analyze them, they kind of shrink. And we go, no, I can handle that.
I
So yeah,
love
that's
that.
how I deal with fear. I
Yeah.
pin it down, I write it down, and just shrink it. And the other thing I just really like to say about that is Well, I taught one semester course at Yale about courage, and I'm going to give you like the 5-second version of a whole semester
Yes,
course
I'd love
now.
to hear it.
The 5-second version is when your motivation is greater than your fear, that's when you're able to move ahead with courage. Because courage is not fearlessness. I mean, fearlessness is often stupidity. But courage is looking at the things you're afraid of and going, I acknowledge these things are scary, but I am so motivated to do this thing. Ideally motivated by love, by passion, by enthusiasm, that I can actually overcome that fear. There you go.
How do you keep up on motivation?
Well, shall we say on my first ocean crossing the Atlantic, motivation often flagged, like every single day. In fact, every single rowing shift of every single day. It was really, really hard. I picked a terrible year to row the Atlantic. The weather was atrocious. All of my oars broke before halfway. In fact, all sorts of stuff broke. Stereo, satellite phone, everything. It was an absolute sufferfest. And my motivation took a really, really big hit. And just thank God, it's logistically very hard to quit in the middle of an ocean. If I could have caught the bus home, I totally would have done. But you just can't. Something that really, really helped me was staying connected to the bigger picture, like the environmental mission and also my personal mission to grow as a person. That was really, really important to me. And I really needed both of those. I needed the bigger picture purpose, but I also needed the personal purpose, because some days one worked and other days the other one worked. I also found out the hard way that if I tried to look too far ahead, I would just go into meltdown. I would start imagining all of these terrible things that could happen in the future. Or I would think of just how damn long it was going to take me to get to the other side of the ocean. And I would just get completely freaked out by it. And it doesn't help. So I developed what I call my bifocal approach, which is, bifocal glasses that older people wear. So through the top half of the lens, that's for long distance vision. So I would have my vision of my goal, whether that was reaching the other side of the ocean or this new life I was crafting for myself, or that obituary exercise, that version of me that I was aiming for. And then through the bottom half of the lens, I would focus on what do I need to do right here, right now, to get myself a little bit closer to that. But there is no lens for in between right now and the long-term vision. And that was good, because I would just melt down if I think we all do that. It's very easy. Again, it's that damn brain thing. It loves to extrapolate into the future and say, well, if I'm feeling a bit tired now, then, in another 1,000 miles from now, I'm going to be even more exhausted. But actually, it doesn't really work that way. So I still take that approach no matter what I'm doing. And by the end, like by my third ocean, which was my longest single voyage, it was 5 months non-stop, alone at sea without seeing another person or seeing dry land. I'd got the whole thing really down to a fine art. I could really just take it one day at a time. So although it was 154 days, in a sense, it was one day 154 times. And I think that's what we have to do, whether it's setting up a new business or or parenting teenagers or whatever it is. Like, eventually everything passes and it's keeping our eye on the vision of the end game and then just what do I need to do right now.
I think that's so powerful, the one day 154 times. It's important to put things into perspective. Now, your journey sounds, I don't want to say romantic, but it sounds like idealized, oh, that's so cool. And don't get me wrong, I think it's hands down amazing. But people forget the struggles that happen along the way to get there. So when you were, I think it was the Atlantic Ocean, when both of your oars broke, can you take us back to that second when your second oar broke and how you were feeling and how you moved on?
Well, actually, of course, I had spare oars with me because redundancy is good. Um, so, well, I won't repeat what I actually said. You know, as each successive oar broke, it's unrepeatable. Um, but there was definitely a sense of this was not the plan, and not just the oars, but I'd planned to use music to help boost my mood, but I was reliant on solar power for all of my electrical stuff. And for the first month, there wasn't enough sunshine to power anything other than the bare essentials, which
Oh,
were
goodness.
GPS, water maker, and satellite phone. And then once the sun came out, I had about 2 days of music, and then the stereo stopped working, and I opened it up, and it was just all rusted away inside. So that was a bummer. Um, Camping stove broke. Yeah, just everything that could go wrong did, basically. Um, and it was really hard. You know, I felt like I was on a mission to help Mother Nature, and Mother Nature was not showing too much gratitude, because not only was everything going wrong on board the boat, but it was the roughest year ever on the Atlantic since records began. Massive waves that would tip the boat right onto its side, and it was also the waves that broke all the oars. It wasn't my brute strength, sadly. It was, and I also had tendonitis in my shoulders, which is kind of like a tendon grating sensation. It's really painful. But even worse than that, with the saltwater sores on my bottom that are just miserable. I mean, just imagine having your bottom covered in the biggest zits that you can picture, and then having to sit on them.
Right.
It really hurts. So it was incredibly hard, and I also had so much psychological maturing to do, and yeah, just unbelievably challenging. Again, coming back to what we were saying earlier about, it's only afterwards, looking back, that you see how things happen for a reason.
Right.
When I was on the Atlantic, I was just pissed off. I was,
Right.
I was like, it wasn't meant to be like this. Exactly. Like you just mentioned, I had this romantic ideal of how it was going to be this beautiful connection with nature. And, you know, there were moments of that, but mostly it was really, really hard and phenomenally boring. And all of those little inner voices, like the inner critics, oh, they were having a field day. Just so hard. And when I finished that voyage, I knew that I had grown a lot. And I thought at the time that I had grown despite all of the things that went wrong. And it was only about 10 years later that I realized that I grew so much because of all the things that went wrong.
Yes.
That if everything had gone smoothly and beautifully and exactly how I'd romantically envisaged it, I wouldn't have learned anywhere near as much as I did about who I am and what I'm capable of, and what I can do when push really comes to shove. So
Yes.
It took a long time to be grateful for those gifts, but I got there eventually.
Can you tell us about your mindset and how that has led to your badassery?
I think that there are so many aspects to that. There were some things, some little thought games that I would play that helped me just to get through those moments when I was really hitting a massive slump in motivation. One of them was to see myself as the hero of my own story, which sounds really pretentious. But what I mean by that is that when everything was just going to hell, I would sort of step outside of myself, because I knew, and it helped, I think, that I was planning to write a book about this later. So I would pretend that I was writing the book right now. So I would sort of describe what was going on as if I was writing it for the book rather than living through it in that moment. And narrating it, even kind of in the third person, would help me to step outside of what was happening right then. Because, you know, when you're in the panic and the fear and the depression, it's so easy to get really caught up in your own thoughts.
It takes over.
It really does. And you really attach to your emotions because they're so real, they're overwhelming you. And somehow by narrating it, it allowed me to not be quite so attached to my thoughts and to my emotions, but to see it a bit more objectively. And also because I was going to be writing the book in the future, I wasn't just kind of stepping outside of myself physically, but I was also stepping outside of myself temporarily. I was stepping into the future and recognizing that at some point, even though this is hell right now, it's going to make a hell of a story in the future.
Right.
I actually learned that when I was in Peru. I think travel can be quite good for that, because travel in Peru, especially when you're traveling on a budget, never goes smoothly. Like, you know, buses run off the road, they get stuck in mud, they get flat tires. It's always a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
And because I'd gone to Peru to write a book, even when my plans were going completely awry and I could have been stressing about not getting to where I wanted to get to and not being able to see a way out of this situation, I was able to go, well, it sucks right now, but it's going to look great in the book. And I think that continues to help me. In a way, it's a little bit Buddhist to be able to detach from everything that is storming in the moment. In my case, quite literally storming, as in winds and rain and massive waves, and just recognize that this too shall pass.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a practical step that all of us can take. Even if you're not going to write a book about it, you can still, hey, this is a cool story that I get to tell. You know, this is something that I endured, that I went through, that I can tell other people about. So I think that that's cool. Can you talk a little bit about your book?
Yeah, I've written a couple of books about the rowing. One was, oh, forgive me, I did not choose this title. My publishers chose it. The first one was called Rowing the Atlantic. I think you can guess what that one's about. The second one was called Stop Drifting, Start Rowing, which is about the Pacific crossing, but it's also really, I mean, they're both very much about the backstory as well, because there's a limit to how much you can say about rowing for 12 hours a day. So they're very much about how I manage the psychological aspects as well. Am I allowed to put in a shameless plug for my upcoming book?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I want to hear about it, yes.
So when the coronavirus pandemic broke out, and I blog every week anyway and write on Medium, and I was thinking, what can I write about? I feel like I have to say something about the coronavirus, because how can I not? And then I went, oh my God, I have something really useful to say about this. Here are all these people in self-isolation, and for a lot of people, it's a really unfamiliar and scary situation. And I was hearing that some people were struggling with it. I was like, I'm an expert. I know all about self-isolation. And over my 3 massive voyages, I developed a lot of techniques for dealing with this. For someone who actually, you know, on the Myers-Briggs thing, I'm sort of on the border between introvert and extrovert. So I'm not an extreme introvert. It hasn't always come naturally to me to be alone. So everything I've learned about this has been from my personal experience. So I have just about finished a book called The Gifts of Solitude that I've written super fast, because I want to get it out there to help people while it's still timely. And in fact, it's really just been an outpouring of what I learned on the ocean. I work as a keynote speaker, so, you know, all of the hundreds of talks that I've given over the last few years. I've written thousands of blog posts, so it's really the sum total of what I've been researching and thinking and reading and speaking about for the last 15 years, just poured out in 2.5 weeks.
I love it.
Into a book. And I'm going to self-publish it on Amazon. hopefully within the next week or so. So by 23rd of April, 2020 at the latest, it should be available as an ebook. And I want everybody who needs it to be able to read it. So it's going to be priced very reasonably. And I just really sincerely hope that it helps. And as I've been writing, you know, it sort of comes back to that intuition and the feeling of love and connection and what can I do to be of service in what's a really challenging time for a lot of people. And that's really where I'm coming from with this.
Yes. And the cool thing is, like, you got an idea and you knew that it could help people and you just took action rather than just like sitting and think about it, you know, for 6 months and then it passes. So I think that that's important. But for any of the women out there who are struggling with this solitude, do you have one tip that could help them?
Something that really worked for me, oh gosh, so many things. Okay, can I have two?
Yeah.
The first one is, I find it tremendously helpful to establish some routines. If you're feeling a bit untethered and a bit afraid, I found that as I did on the boat, if I stuck with the routine of 4 shifts of rowing for 3 hours with an hour off in between, just establishing some routine made everything seem so much more manageable. I just clung to that routine like my life depended on it. So it's a great time just to put in some structure, because so much is uncontrollable. So we need to control what we can.
Right.
And then if I had to pick one other, it would be talking out loud, which sounds a bit crazy, but actually it really, really helped me, because I did find that when I got into that emotional thought spiral, like the spiral of death,
Yes.
I felt like I was just going down the drain. If I started talking out loud about what I was afraid of, it somehow diminished the fear. Just to give it a name, you know, to say, right now I'm feeling afraid about this. And then to reach for the most positive feeling that you can find in that moment, which might be something like, but I've been afraid of things before and I managed to get through them. And then when you've managed to do something, whether it's sticking to your new routine or whatever, just be your own best friend. Like, be kind to yourself, give yourself some loving kindness and some self-care. And when you have managed to do something that was hard for you, if that's getting through another day of isolation, give yourself a pat on the back. Say, well done. Like, you were afraid of that, you struggled with it, but you got through it. Like, good for you, bloody good job, girl.
Right, right.
Give yourself some affirmation, congratulate yourself.
Yes.
These are hard times. And, you know, I relate. All of my paid work has gone away. Like, a lot of us are feeling the financial fear in a big way.
Right.
But giving into panic and fear doesn't help. We just have to trust that we have resources. And I love that saying. Now, was it Eleanor Roosevelt? I think it was, who said, a woman is like a tea bag. You don't know how strong she is until you put her in hot water.
Right. But like in life, we have to test ourselves. You know, if we're not putting ourselves in hot water or putting ourselves in tough situations, then you're never going to grow. You're never going to learn.
Exactly. It is exactly how we grow. I mean, yes, we can grow somewhat by reading books and sitting on the couch, but it's the hard times that really accelerate that growth.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, definitely Rowing the Atlantic was an absolute crash course in personal development. And I think coronavirus for us collectively is our crash course. Oh, and sorry, I've got a third one.
Go for it. Yeah.
Just when you're struggling, reach out and do something kind for somebody else.
Yeah, can you explain that?
Feel good.
Yeah,
just doing something that connects you with other people. So if a memory of a friend flickers across your mind, just ping them a quick message on email or WhatsApp or whatever, and just say, hey, thinking of you and hope you're doing okay and what's up. I hope that that's what's going to come out of this time, because this is really the biggest, if not the only example that I can think of in my lifetime of when so many of us have been, so to speak, in the same boat of struggle and fear and isolation. And I really think there's an opportunity in this, and the opportunity is going to be realized primarily, I think, by building community, by rebuilding this fabric of connection between us. And whether you've had a difference of opinion with somebody over politics, we've had Brexit, you've had divisive politics, a lot has gone on that has driven wedges between people, and yet now we are united as never before by our shared enemy of the coronavirus. So it's a great time to get things in perspective and rise above past disagreements and just reach out to people and say, hey, I care about you and I'm thinking about you.
Yeah. And took the words right out of my mouth. It's all about perspective, and sometimes it changes your perspective, but for the good. You can use it to change your life, really. I mean, I know that I'm a huge introvert, but like this still makes me realize, okay, I need people. I definitely need my community. So
yes,
Roz,
we do.
Let's end with a tip to encourage women who are in the arena fighting for the life that they want, and if you'll share how the audience can connect with you.
Yeah, well, I would love to support anybody who's on that journey to find what, just really will make them smile, make them feel love, make them feel connection. And when they get to the end of it all, make them able to look back without any regrets and hopefully with a whole load of pride. So please let me know, how I can support you, dear listener. You can contact me. I suppose my central repository always is at rozsavage.com. That's R-O-Z or Z, depending on where you are. Savage, just like it sounds, .com. And there are links there to the Gifts of Solitude and also to my women's non-profit organisation called The Sisters, which is very much about building resilience, both individually and collectively, as we go through these interesting times, both with the coronavirus and beyond. So please do feel free to reach out, and it is all about connection, whether it's coronavirus or otherwise. We're all in this together. We are all humans being, and I think we all owe it to ourselves to be everything that we can be, to keep on growing. And, things are hard, but hard things are good.
Yes, so good. I love that. Roz, thank you so much. I've enjoyed hearing your story. You are a total badass.
Thank you. I'll take that.
With that, we'll end our show. To all the badass women out there staying in the arena, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, own it and get after it.
Now that you've listened to this episode of Ordinary to Badass, we want to hear from you. Go to our website, ordinarytobadass.com/podcast, and submit your own experience on how you took your life from ordinary to badass, and get the chance to be on a future Spotlight episode of the show. That's ordinarytobadass.com/podcast. While you're waiting for the next episode of the show, wipe off the sweat, dust off the dirt, and get back in the arena.